The old man only asked to buy the cheapest meal on the menu. The young waitress quietly handed him a box of food and was fired on the spot. "We don't give handouts here," the manager roared. 3 days later, a group of Marines walked into the diner. They didn't say a word. They just stood tall and saluted in unison. And then, the whole place fell silent. You think you've seen all the injustice in the world. Not yet. This is a story you have to hear until the very end, Thursday afternoon. A first-of-the-season breeze swept through the eaves of suburban Columbus, Ohio, carrying a chill that made the Maple Diner sign creak in the wind. Inside, the golden glow of the lights had just come on. The scene seemed ordinary, the smell of toasted bread mingling with hot coffee, blending with the soft piano notes drifting from an old speaker. But that day, something happened that no one would ever forget. The old man appeared just past 4 o'clock. His jacket was worn at the shoulders, his khakis faded, and his old military boots were scuffed and thin. On his head was a moss-green cap, pinned with a small emblem, one that hardly anyone recognized anymore. He walked limply, clutching something carefully wrapped in a gray scarf. When the glass door swung open, a few eyes glanced his way. Not because he was loud, but because he was so quiet. He stood at the counter, his voice hoarse and low. "Give me the cheapest thing you've got." The young cashier hesitated, probably new to the job, but then a man stepped forward. White dress shirt, tie askew, face stern. The manager. He frowned and said sharply, "You again? I told you not to come back." The old man didn't get a chance to respond. "This isn't a soup kitchen. If you want to beg, go somewhere else." The manager's voice boomed, drawing stares from a few customers. A little girl by the window covered her mouth. Someone raised a phone, starting to record. But the old man didn't react, didn't explain. He just lowered his head and turned to leave, as if he was used to it. One pair of eyes saw it all. A young woman named Lena, a server, was wiping glasses at the corner of the counter. She saw him walk in, saw him lower his head, and saw his eyes not the eyes of a lost soul, but the gaze of someone who'd once led the way. When the manager turned and stormed off, Lena quietly approached the old man and softly asked, "Have you eaten anything today?" He gave a faint smile, a sad, weary smile, without waiting. Lena slipped into the kitchen. She packed a leftover meal from a canceled order, put it in a box, and went out the back door, where he stood by an old, faded bicycle. "I can't let you go home empty-handed," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, clouded with age. His blue eyes held something that sent a chill down her spine. It was as if that gaze had once cut through battlefields and seen things no ordinary person could imagine. Not a word, just a small envelope. He gently placed it on the box's lid. "If anyone ever asks why you were kind, give them this." Then he turned away, pedaled his old bike, and melted into the sunset, falling over the street. Lena stood there, holding the box and the envelope. She didn't fully understand what had just happened, but something sacred was quietly tapping at her heart. Those moments didn't last. About 30 minutes later, Lena was called to the office back at the counter. The manager had checked the cameras. "You think this is a place to give out free food?" he snapped. Lena tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. "I don't tolerate foolish kindness here. You're fired." The air in the room turned cold. Lena walked out, her eyes red, still clutching the envelope he'd left. Under the dim light of the diner's awning, she opened it. Inside, just one trembling line to my brothers until the end. She didn't fully grasp its meaning, but deep in her heart, something stirred. and it would never rest again. A sudden drizzle fell over Columbus the next morning. Streaks of water blurred the bus windows, mixing with the red glow of streetlights, making the city feel hazy, cold, like Lena's mind at that moment. She sat quietly by the window, the takeout box from yesterday still untouched in her bag. The crumpled letter was tucked into her coat pocket. She hadn't slept all night, not out of pity for the old man, but because something about him made her feel ashamed. Ashamed of how society had forgotten those who once walked ahead of us all. Lena didn't go home after turning in her uniform at the diner. She started walking toward Westerville, where an older customer once mentioned an old man living alone with no family. Dawn began to break. A mobile home park appeared behind a rusty chain-link fence. A faded trailer, covered in green moss, stood at the end of a gravel path. In front of the door, an old dog lay curled up, its once white fur now ashen gray. But as Lena approached, it didn't bark. It just lifted its head, wagging its tail faintly. She knocked. No answer. The door wasn't locked. Lena hesitated for a moment, then gently pushed it open. The space inside was cramped but tidy. Wooden crates lined the walls, an old radio, a few letters, a stack of yellowed files. A single black and white photo hung on the wall, 5 soldiers standing in a ravaged land, faces caked with mud, eyes unblinking. The man in the center was him younger. Thick hair, shoulders squared, but that gaze was the same as yesterday. Lena touched the frame. Her fingers trembled slightly. Tucked behind the photo was a small note, loosely pinned. "To the bravest soul I know, meet me in Arlington when the world forgets us." She didn't fully understand its meaning, but her throat tightened. Half a stale loaf of bread and a cold cup of coffee sat on the table. Under the tablecloth, she found a notebook. When she opened it, page after page revealed firm handwriting dates, times, coordinates, all a soldier's log, short, precise notes, as if the writer still lived in every step, every gunshot of the past. On the final page, just one line. "They all went home. I'm still stuck here." Lena left the trailer as the early sun cast a golden glow over the maple trees in the yard. She took nothing, only carrying a burning question. Who was he? She stopped at the public library on her way back to the city. Typed Harold Grayson into the veteran records search. The screen loaded slowly. Then an old, faded article appeared. Sergeant Harold J. Grayson, Silver Star recipient, Fallujah, 2004. Her heart seemed to stop. Below were a few brief lines. Sergeant Grayson saved 12 soldiers during a 3-day siege. He refused all medals. Asked only to be buried with his brothers. Lena read it again and again. Every word, every line, as if trying to hold on to something slipping away. She couldn't believe it. The man chased out of a diner over a box of leftover food had once carried the lives of an entire unit. At the bottom of the article was a single comment, posted 3 years ago. If anyone still remembers him, find him. He doesn't need glory, he just needs to be remembered. Lena left the library as the city hit rush hour. Cars roared, people hurried past. No one knew among those crowds. A man once held a battle line alone. No one saw he was still quietly walking, carrying a past this entire country owed a thank you. And Lena, in that moment, understood. She had met a hero. Not the kind on the news, but the kind of world too often forgets, because they choose to stay silent and ask for nothing, and never proclaim who they are. The morning sky was unusually clear. Sunlight spilled softly onto the street, filtering through maple branches starting to turn orange and red. Lena stood across the road, holding a steaming paper coffee cup, her eyes fixed on the Maple Diner. She hadn't returned since being fired, but this morning, something urged her to come back, not to apologize, but to quietly watch. She never expected he would return too. At exactly 9:12 a.m., the old bicycle appeared at the end of the street. Its wheels crunched faintly on the asphalt, a sound so small that almost no one noticed. The old man wore the same worn jacket, the moss-green cap casting a cool shadow over his wrinkled forehead. In his hands, he clutched a small wooden box. He didn't approach the counter or look for a table like other customers. He went straight to the table by the window, where, 3 days ago, he had stood silently, then been driven out like someone unwanted. Lena stood frozen. No one in the diner recognized him. Or maybe they pretended not to. Laughter and chatter continued, forks clinking against plates. No one greeted him. No one asked how he was. He set the wooden box on the table, opening it gently. Inside was a silver medal, an eagle with spread wings cradling a small star, an old Marine Corps emblem. Beside it, a faded cloth patch with the words, "First in, last out." No one cared, no one looked up. He quietly placed an envelope on the table, thin, sealed shut, no recipient's name, just one line. "This is my thank you." Then he turned, walking slowly toward the door. The manager's voice boomed behind him as he reached for the handle. "I told you not to come back here." The air grew heavy. A few customers stopped eating. The old man paused, turned, but said nothing. He only bowed his head slightly, as if apologizing. The manager didn't stop. He stormed over, snatching the box off the table. The silver medal fell to the floor. "This means nothing here," he said loudly. A customer chuckled. A young woman raised her phone, aiming the camera at him. "Keep filming. Look at the old guy playing veteran." Laughter erupted. Probably didn't get his hand out, so now he's pulling a sob story. The old man bent down, picking up the medal. His hands trembled, but he gripped the small object tightly, as if it were part of his body. Lena couldn't take it anymore. She crossed the street, pushed through the door, and shouted, "Stop it!" All eyes turned to her. The manager froze. Lena rushed to the old man's side, steadying him as he trembled. "You don't have to stay here," she said, her voice breaking. "Not in a place where they treat you like this." He only smiled, that smile again, gentle, resigned, but also the smile of someone who had never felt ashamed of who he was. Lena took his hand cold, rough, but warmer than anything she'd ever touched. As they turned to leave, a small voice came from the corner of the diner. A boy, about 12, stared at the medal in the old man's hand and whispered, "Dad, that's like the one Uncle has." The man next to the boy looked up. Confusion flashed in his eyes, then shock. He stepped about to say something, but stopped, as if something held him back. And in that moment, the diner fell silent. No more laughter, no clinking dishes, just heavy breathing, and eyes fixed on the man whom they had dismissed for the past week. A few glances grew uneasy. Someone muttered, "Wait, who is he?" No one had an answer. Only this time, the silence wasn't contempt, it was fear, the vague feeling that they had just made a mistake, one they couldn't undo. Lena held his hand tighter. But the old man only shook his head slightly, stepping back, in his eyes no resentment, only forgiveness, and a story that had never been told. The next noon, sunlight poured straight onto the street, glinting off the asphalt like polished stones. Everything seemed strangely peaceful, as if yesterday had never happened. The Maple Diner was still bustling. No one mentioned the old man, no one asked about Lena. Everything returned to normal, or at least they believed it did. Lena came back not out of regret, nor to apologize. She just felt something unresolved in her heart. She stood outside, peering through the dusty glass. The manager was on the phone behind the counter. A group of students at the back table laughed and joked. A breeze carried the smell of exhaust, the honk of a truck. But then, those sounds were drowned out by something else. A sharp screech of brakes, tires grinding against the road. A line of sleek black SUVs pulled up to the curb. No sirens, no noise. The doors swung open. 6 men stepped out, dress uniforms crisp. No weapons, no flashy insignia, just neat attire and eyes that looked straight ahead, as if they knew exactly who they were seeking. One of them, the leader, held something wrapped in black cloth. They said nothing, didn't glance aside, didn't hesitate. They entered the diner, moving in a formation that felt practiced 1,000 times. Lena stepped inside at the same moment. As the door opened, the air in the diner shifted, conversations hushed, forks and knives went still. The lead Marine approached the counter. His voice wasn't loud, but firm. "We're here for Harold Grayson." The diner froze. 1 second, then 2. No one answered. The manager's lips twitched, but before he could speak, the Marine raised a hand, stopping him. He turned to Lena, stepped closer. His eyes locked onto her face. "You're the only one who treated him like a human being." Lena couldn't speak. Another Marine stepped forward, pulling a photo from his jacket. It was the picture she'd seen 5 soldiers in a war-torn field. Surrounding them was an older man, Grayson, younger, but those eyes, they were the same. The photo was placed in Lena's hands. She looked at it. Her fingers trembled. Another Marine approached the table from the day before, where Grayson had been driven out. They set down the silver medal, the one he'd dropped. No one in the diner dared speak. The man who'd laughed at him stared at the floor. The girl who'd recorded the video was now inching toward the door, quietly deleting the clip from her phone. Lena gripped the photo tightly. Her throat tightened, but what shattered everyone was still to come. A younger Marine, barely in his 30s, stepped forward. His voice was calm, but something in it was ready to erupt. Years ago. He wasn't just our commander. He was the one who saved our lives. He looked up, his eyes blazed. 3 days, pinned down in Fallujah. No supplies, no water, no hope. But he didn't leave anyone behind. He was the last one out. The diner was silent. No one touched their food. No one breathed loudly. The manager stood behind the counter, hands clenched. His eyes were fixed on the table, where the lead Marine had gently placed the cloth-wrapped object. Inside was a silver star medal. The Marine spoke softly. We tried to give it to him once. He refused. He said, "I don't keep honor, I keep promises." And then, without a signal, all 6 Marines stood at attention. They saluted her in unison. A single, sharp motion. Not a word was spoken. None were needed. Everything was more than enough. The air felt heavy as lead. No clinking dishes, no whispers. Lena stood there, tears silently streaming down her face. No one in the diner spoke that day. Each person stood still, as if pulled back into a reality they'd once ignored. The 6 Marines remained at attention. Lena stepped forward quietly, her hands trembling, and placed the silver medal back where it belonged, as if restoring something sacred to its rightful place. She looked up, meeting the eyes of the youngest Marine. He nodded slightly, then began to speak. Not with the tone of someone boasting, but with the voice of someone who'd seen death and been pulled back from the edge by one man. "My name is Corporal Mitchell. In 2004, I was just 21, a rookie, knew nothing beyond drills and orders. We were deployed to Fallujah, a battle no one wants to talk about, but no one can forget. He paused. He took a deep breath as if trying to keep those memories from shattering in his mind. 3 days, no food, no water, every night, just gunfire. Comrades screaming over the radio, and the silence of those who never answered again. We were trapped. No commander, no map, no plan to get out, until he showed up. The diner stayed motionless. Mitchell looked up, staring at the ceiling, as if seeing through this place, back to that moment years ago. He didn't say much, just signaled. He led us to an old ammo bunker, shared the water, gave more to the wounded. He used his jacket to stop a soldier's bleeding. He didn't know our names, but he remembered every man's eyes, and he didn't let anyone get left behind. Another Marine spoke up. He had a large scar on his arm. When the chopper came, he was the last one on. He told the pilot, "Take off when you hear me tap 3 times. If you don't get the signal, go, don't wait for me." He let out a laugh, but it caught in his throat. He made it out, but after that, he never took a medal, never spoke to the press, never told anyone. What he did, Lena asked softly, her voice breaking. Why Mitchell looked at her. His eyes were red. Because he once said, "I just want to keep my promise to those who didn't come back." He pulled out an old piece of paper, a handwritten letter from the President of the United States, addressed to Sergeant Harold J. Grayson, a thank you for his courage and sacrifice. The signature was still clear, but he'd never shown it, never used it to prove anything. Another Marine, standing near the back, said quietly, "We've been looking for him for 4 years, knew he was in Ohio, but no one knew where. Every time we got a lead, he'd quietly move on. No one knew why, until that video from the other day got posted." Lena froze. She glanced at the table nearby. The customer who'd laughed at him now stared at the floor. The girl who'd recorded the video had slipped out quietly. Mitchell stepped forward, resting a hand on Lena's shoulder. "You were the only one who didn't turn away from him. You gave him a meal, but to us, you gave back the dignity of a man who saved an entire unit's lives." She couldn't speak. Her heart felt like it was being squeezed. Gratitude, sorrow, and respect merged into a nameless wave of emotion. Suddenly, a child's voice broke through from the diner's corner. "Mom? Was he a hero?" The mother leaned down. Tears fell on her cheeks. "No, honey, he wasn't a hero. He's always been a hero." And then, as if something unspoken passed through the room, every person in the diner began to stand. No one gave an order, no one said a word. But from the young server to the elderly customer, they all bowed their heads before an empty chair, before a man who'd lived his entire life to keep a promise. The following week, Harold Grayson left the city, no warning. No one knew where he went. His blind dog, Bullet, was taken in by a kind neighbor. Lena returned, hoping to say one final thing, but the trailer was empty. Everything was gone, except a handwritten note on the old wooden table. The shaky but resolute script read, "Thank you for seeing me, not for who I was, but for who I still am." Lena held the note, stepping out of the trailer. She didn't cry, but her heart caught in her chest, a quiet ache, as if a chapter had closed when no one could reopen. No news outlet covered it. No ceremony honored him. But the way he left silently, without a trace, made him unforgettable. The Maple Diner changed after that. The table by the window where he once sat was gone. In its place, a stone bench stood against the wall, etched with faded bronze in honor of those who walk quietly, but carry nations behind them. Inside, behind the counter, a small sign read, This table belongs to those who served. No one needs to ask why. Lena didn't go back to work there. She took a job at a small coffee shop near the university, a quieter place, closer to the morning light. But before her shift, she tucked a tarnished silver emblem into her left pocket every day. Once, a young student asked, "Who's that from?" Lena just smiled, softly, very softly. "From someone who taught me kindness doesn't need a paycheck. It's paid in honor." Months later, a high school student who was at the diner that day applied to enlist. In his handwritten letter, he wrote, "That day, seeing 6 men salute an empty chair, he understood honor isn't found in books. It has to be lived, to be earned." And not long after, at Arlington National Cemetery, a silver-haired man appeared. No announcement, no company. He wore an old khaki jacket, in his hands, a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. He walked slowly, knelt before a nameless grave. The headstone bore only, "For the ones who never asked for glory," only peace. He said nothing, but his hands trembled as he placed the flowers down. Standing a few steps away, a child tugged her father's hand and whispered, "Dad, who's that man?" The father looked long and hard, his eyes fixed on the figure kneeling there. Then answered slowly, "Someone you should be grateful for your whole life, even if he never asked you to be." And then he stood, laid the flowers on the grave, turned away, not a sound, not a glance back, as if what needed to be done, he'd done, and all that remained was to stay silent for those who could no longer speak. In that quiet space, a soft breeze stirred. The small flag by the grave fluttered, making a gentle rustle like a salute from those no longer present. A silent salute, but one that echoed to the heart. Because some heroes don't wear uniforms anymore, but they still lead, it still carries weight, and still deserve to be seen. If you're still thinking about Harold, you're not alone. Some heroes pass through our lives quietly, with no applause, no spotlight, but they are why we still have a place called home. If this story moved you, touched something deep inside, share the video so no one forgets those who sacrificed and still live among us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more human stories like this, and leave a comment below. We want to hear your thoughts, because sometimes one small act from you can restore honor to the quietest among us.